That's a
Now,
fact.
the co-main event, the Bullet herself, Valentina Shevchenko, came in, did her thing like we all predicted. Shouts out to Lauren Murphy. Definitely, try to be game, but Valentina is just too skilled for her. She went in there, she dominated all aspects of the fight, standing up on the ground to eventually get the finish. I mean, I'm not necessarily mad at her, but I'm not mad at her for, the way she competed, but I think she was just outclassed. You know what I mean? Shouts out to Valentina, one of the best females to ever do it. And I think the UFC should definitely get behind her.
Oh, no, that's a fact. I think they need to stand more behind her after seeing this performance. This performance overall, it was a clear indication that Valentina is just a dominant figure within her division as well as within this fight. She at no point in this fight did I feel any concern that Valentina had a tenth of a percent of losing this fight, right? I didn't even have that much doubt in me. Valentina, shout out to Lauren Murphy as well, but she did look nervous in there when she was fighting. She was getting eat up by some leg kicks as well. That probably didn't help because I'm not sure if you noticed, but when she was in her stance or coming out into the match, there was all this bouncing jitteriness that is seen while Valentina just looked like she just looked so calm. Like she looked like she had just woken up from a nap, how calm she was in there. And just teeing her off, I'm surprised. I was surprised that Murphy made it this far into the fight by the fight ending in the fourth round because she was just taking a beating the whole time. There's nothing you can do against a fighter like that. Sometimes it's just the way it works. Someone that good comes along and you just can't beat them no matter how hard you can try. And Murphy did try, but it just wasn't enough.
Now, going to the main event after this, and I think the main event delivered way more than I expected it to. Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega, match of the night, featherweight title fight. Wow, that fight was good. I was talking to Spence last night, and usually MMA math is a crazy thing. And I figured because Alexander Volkanovski was able to hang in there with Max Holloway, his stand-up will be good enough to hang in there with Brian Ortega. I also noticed that Brian Ortega, while he has more of a submission game, his overall ground control, I'll say, I don't think is necessarily better than Alexander Volkanovski. And that showed last night, in my opinion. Alexander Volkanovski, went in there, and I think when he started really connecting with his shots, I think he showed as to why he's the current champion. And I thought that the performance he put on was amazing.
Nah, I agree. I think this performance was amazing. Volkanovski showed that there was a difference between the two fighters. He was able to stay in the pocket most of the time, hitting them with a jab, being able to slip his punches, connecting to the body, hitting them with any shots that he wanted. And he was taking some hits, though, because there was a moment in time where I got to give Brian Ortega his credit, where Brian Ortega, he was taking a beating. I think it was in the second round. He found a way of actually clipping Volkanovski and dropping him. As soon as he dropped him, he tried to go for a submission. And it was like such a chain of events, a turning change of events that it ramped up the fight so much more. And then I think that in that second round, Brian Ortega almost came close to getting a submission twice, but Volkanovski, he wasn't having it. The only way he was losing that fight is if he left out on the stretcher. You could tell. And like you said before, his game planning for this fight, it superseded like all the MMA math that we could probably even calculate, because he just looked, stand-up wise, he looked like he was a better stand-up fighter. On the ground, he was a better fighter on the ground. Submission wise, he was almost getting submitted. He almost got submitted a couple times, and he was getting caught by Brian Ortega, but he was just leaving damage. Brian Ortega, at some point in the fight, at the end of the fight, they came close to the refs had to step in, which probably helped him so he can get a second win to see if he should even continue fighting, because his eyes looked like they were closing shut from that knee that Volkanovski gave to him. So,
I personally thought that when he caught those two submissions in the third, I was like, oh, this fight might be over, because it just seemed so like tight. and he's known for, putting on triangles and, his submission game. So when he had the guillotine and the triangle, I was like, ooh, this, might be a little rough, but he pulled out and he was able to make it to the rest of the fight. I was thoroughly impressed by Alexander Volkanovski. And last week I had said that I wasn't necessarily a fan of his fighting style, but I mean, like after watching this fight, and maybe, I was just hating a little bit, but watching that fight last night, I enjoyed that fight a lot. So definitely all the kudos to him.
Yeah, I definitely the kudos to him. I do have a question though. So in terms of after seeing a dominant fight from Volkanovski last night, as well as seeing how he had a game plan for beating Max Holloway in their last fight, what do you think is the best option or the best move for Volkanovski in his next potential opponent?
I mean,
at this point,
I think that what they're going to try to do is Yair versus Max Holloway. I'm also seeing some reports that Zabit is back. So I know that people, really want to see Zabit fight. But that being said, because he's been out for so long, he's going to need I think 1 or 2 more fights to actually be the next contender. Right. But I think Max Holloway, the trilogy is going to happen at some point just because they seem to be the best ones to do it. Max Holloway, I don't see him losing to Yair. And after you beat Calvin Kattar the way he did, and if he beats Yair, then, what else does he have to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think the thing about Max Holloway is Max has found his way of being one of those guys in that division. And I think even at featherweight, I don't see him. I don't see in terms of his road back to the title or for that trilogy. I do see him making his way there. I mean, like you said, Zabit, that would be great. But if you're coming back from an injury, you do need to have he hasn't built up the status or the right to come back off an injury and come for a championship, right? So he hasn't got himself to that point, but I don't know. I think I can see that happening where we end up getting that trilogy some way. But yeah, I think that might be the best option as well. Like finding a way of getting that trilogy between him and Max, which would probably be a great fight. I mean, depending on how the fight goes, because now I believe what they are. Volkanovski's up. Volkanovski's what 2-0 against Max, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's even if a trilogy happens, it's weird because in the event of a trilogy, typically if you win the fight the first time, you win the fight the second time, and ideally the third time as well. But with someone like Max, he's good and he's willing to put in the work. It's just all about. I think it really depends on the game plan that Volkanovski could possibly show if that ends up being his next fight. But nonetheless, shout outs to Volkanovski. It was probably to me the fight of the night for myself and by preference from what I saw. So,
well, I mean, there was some other news in the UFC. GSP got inducted into the Hall of Fame. And one of Jon Jones's fights got inducted to the Hall of Fame as well. Unfortunately, Jon Jones, being my favorite fighter, also had some rough situation go on. We don't know exactly as to all the details. He said that he wants to be back next year in quarter 2 to fight. But if the details of this report are correct, it looks like he might be in trouble with the law. Jon Jones got arrested for what appears to be domestic violence and tampering with a vehicle, which is also a felony, apparently, where they are in Vegas. Spence, what do you have to make of all this?
It's still too early to come out with an opinion, right? In terms of the typical rhetoric when it comes to Jon Jones of this is a guy that can't get right. Based off his history and past, this doesn't look good just because it just seems like something's trailing him. But I do need to see more details come out about this on how this whole thing happened. It is unfortunate nonetheless, because in that Hall of Fame, during that inductee for the Hall of Fame, when they had a chance to interview Jon, he was talking about how he wanted to go into quarter 2. He's trying to get up to 275 before he starts cutting weight to fight in heavyweight. And when I believe they asked him questions about some of the things like drinking and everything like that. And he made it sound as though yeah, that's my past life. Pretty much it sounded like someone that was like, yo, I'm staying on the straight and narrow and I'm an adult. I've grown out of these situations. If these events end up being true, it's going to be a little disheartening to see someone say something like that, and then less than 24 hours later, they found themselves getting arrested for a domestic violence charge. But hopefully, I hope it's not. Hopefully, this is all a misunderstanding. But even then, like if the evidence comes out that he's done something again, it's a black eye. And I think, to be honest with you, if this comes out that it's something that he did and ends up putting a black eye on him, I think this may end up messing up his quest to be in heavyweight, because at the end of the day, it's too much of a liability. Because imagine you doing this and you try and set this fight up with him and Francis, and then something like this pops up.
If Jon Jones is in trouble the way that the reports make it seem to be, I think this is the last time we really see Jon Jones fight. Like, you know what I mean? I think the legacy that, I mean, let's just be real. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if it is as bad as what it's being made out to be, like, why would you just keep on putting the title? Because, excuse me, I mean, if we're being honest, Jon Jones isn't coming back and just fighting just to fight. He's going to fight either a top contender at heavyweight, or he's going to fight for the title, which he should fight for the title because he's Jon Jones. So, like, at the end of the day, I just don't see how you can do that with somebody who is getting in trouble like that. And I would hope that it's not that, but only time will tell.
Yeah, definitely. So only time will tell. It doesn't look good, especially if he wants to try to continue something. It really hurts me if this is the last time we see Jon. And even if we don't, I wouldn't be surprised if this is probably the end of an era for him. He's having at some point this has to get old, and I'm quite sure the stress of it is probably going. I wouldn't be surprised if the stress of this, even after having like a clean record for the past couple of years, and this still follows you, I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up impacting him going into his next fight, or if he does have a next fight based off the type of charges that's going on, or if he does fight again. I don't think he should be fighting for a title right away. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if I don't know. It wouldn't be surprising if Dana says, "Hey, listen, Jon's having all this stuff happen. How about we give him Cyril Gane? If Cyril Gane beats him, we get Jon out the picture completely, and this also helps boost up this other kid. But it just wouldn't be a big fight. And even I think Jon has said that. But with this case, he's not in a position really to dictate what gets offered to him at this point, unfortunately.
Right, exactly. Like I think Jon Jones, the leverage that he did have, he kind of lost a little bit just because, like, you know, the stuff that keeps on going on around him. I think I don't know what happened in the situation, but the fact that his name is involved in situations like this so much, he just has to be careful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my bad. Yeah, he does. He has to be careful, but it's just, he has to be careful, but at the end of the day, you're going to do what you want to do. And I think I'm just hoping that well, I'll put it like this. I think the Jon Jones story, how we were talking about the Kanye documentary, I think the Jon Jones documentary,
it's going to be amazing.
Blockbuster.
It's going to be great.
Honestly, I think the same way they had how they had like that OJ trial was a series. I think Jon Jones should be a series as well. When his life story is said, it should be a life story, because it's crazy to see someone at this high of a level have these type of difficulties. Now, granted, it comes with this territory, but it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, and I'm just curious to see what happens when it comes.